Hey friends, welcome back to the Pulse Strong podcast with me, your host, Becky Dunn. Today I am joined by sports nutritionist Nina, and we talk all things nutrition and how to fuel your body correctly. I've linked Nina's Instagram and website below. I strongly recommend checking out her blogs. You can watch this episode in full on my YouTube channel, Becky Dunn Fitness. I hope you enjoy this podcast just as much as I did. Nina, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be on.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm really excited I found your page. Super interesting. I'm going to link it all anyway, but you are a nutritionist through and through. Tell me a little bit about your background, how you got to where you are, what you predominantly do too.
Yeah, so I am a nutritionist and sports nutritionist and also CrossFit. So I is kind of involve doing Zoom consults, so one-to-one coaching in terms of nutrition consults with people from all over the world, mostly in the area of sports nutrition, disordered eating, and plant-based diets. I'd say they're kind of my main areas that I work with clients on, but a whole range of clients. And then I also coach CrossFit, and I do CrossFit myself as well, which is a massive other passion.
CrossFit athlete, I love that. I did do CrossFit for a little while. It is really good fun.
It's really fun. I love how varied it is and how there's always things to improve on and things to work on, which makes it a big challenge, but also really keeps it interesting.
Yeah. You cut out the very little first thing you said when you said, what do you do? I got you a nutrition, but I'm like the signal cut, it dropped.
Oh, yeah. So I basically just said I'm a nutritionist and sports nutritionist, and a CrossFit coach as well. So they're kind of the main areas that I work in. And yeah, the thing that got me basically down the path of nutrition was I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 9 years old, which kind of placed a really big emphasis on like food and counting carbs to dose insulin and manage my blood sugar levels, and having a lot of appointments with dietitians and a lot in that scene. And it really also gave me a big appreciation for how food impacts my health and how I feel through managing diabetes, which I'm a massive perfectionist, and I took it to the extreme with managing my blood sugars and counting carbs and then cutting out carbs to the point that it led down a really rocky path with an eating disorder. Throughout my teens, I really struggled with my relationship with food, in and out of hospital, missed a lot of school because of that. Yeah, had a massive impact on my life, and fully consumed my life for, I'd say, close to 10 years. And going through all of that and then coming out the other end, going to study nutrition is what gave me such a big passion for not just the topic of nutrition itself, but also our relationship with food and how, we can be focused on health and nourishing our bodies, but at the same time also creating a really healthy and positive mindset around food.
Oh, it's so important. But it's very easily said than done. It's very easier said than done when it comes to creating a mindset around food, which why I think it's so important to work with somebody or someone that's just knowledgeable. But that's going back to so you had type 1 diabetes. One thing you do learn when you start doing your qualifications in whether it's your personal training, that not always, but the early symptoms of diabetes, it can be offset by what you eat. You can reverse some of the symptoms or how extreme it can be by what you are putting into your body. And I think it's with it leading into a disorder too, something that a lot of people can relate to. But I know yours comes from another extreme angle, but from a teen,
I do want to say really important that there's a big difference between type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. So
yes, of course.
Type 1 diabetes is that autoimmune condition where, unfortunately, no matter what you do in terms of diet and exercise, you can't produce insulin. So you've got that for life, and you can 100% help to manage blood glucose levels through diet and exercise, and that will have definitely a really positive outcome on your well-being and your diabetes management. However, can't make it go away. And I was naive 10, 11-year-old who really thought I could cure this by like being super on top of my diet and exercise, but it's just not possible, versus type 2 diabetes where, you know,
it's
you
a bit
can
more
potentially
manageable.
get. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose the pressure of being a teen too, right? Adding just all of that into the mix, like, you know, when you just want to, the whole dieting, I don't know what fad diets you had around when you were a teenager. Like we had ones that were like cereals, like a lot of cereal diets, you know, just eating cereal like 2 times a day, or like the typical meal replacements. Like, it's awful. It's so bad. Okay, cool. So when did you get into CrossFit?
I've been doing CrossFit for, I want to say, around 4 years now, and I kind of fell into it by chance. I was a competitive swimmer throughout high school. So yeah, I came from a swimming background, did a triathlon, bit of running. So it's kind of all the long distance endurance type of stuff. But I did have to quit sport completely for a few years when I was in recovery, just because I was like not well enough to exercise, which was also a really difficult process. But then once I was well enough to start exercising again, you know, transitioning to adulthood, where I live, it just wasn't an option to swim like as part of a club anymore. It was like, you know, high school swimming, and then once you get out of that, you're an adult, there's no clubs around. You can either just go exercise for fun or do something else. And for me, because I'm a competitive person, I love that kind of team atmosphere. I wanted to find something that I could do like as part of a club. And then by chance, some of my friends had opened a CrossFit style of gym, and I kind of fell into that from there and have never looked back. Absolutely love it.
Oh, I love that. It's so good when you find your passion in something, or you find the enjoyment in that sport where you're like, this is my thing. Like, I love this. And do you compete?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely love competing. Super fun.
Yeah. Wow. The CrossFit competitions are just like, they're just extreme. Well, like what some of the
pretty hectic.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk. So you went and studied nutrition in more detail. I saw on your Instagram and on your website that you're plant-based, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Have you always been plant-based?
So I actually decided to go vegetarian when I was in grade 6. So what would I have been? Probably around 10 years old or so. And it was actually an interesting story because I used to have pet rabbits, and I'm originally from Switzerland. And when we moved to Australia from Switzerland, the people we lived with, it was like on a farm, they ended up like killing the rabbits and like eating them essentially. And kind of like hearing that story, it kind of gave me that connection of, okay, these are my rabbits and they're eating them now, and I don't want to do that anymore. So kind of that was the
turning point.
Yeah,
that's quite a young age though. From you, you know, you've decided quite young. You're like, nope, I'm out. I don't want to do this.
Literally. And then I don't even know if veganism was really like a thing back then. But yeah, just I was introduced to veganism actually through social media, just kind of finding out like more about it, and kind of sparked my curiosity. And yeah, I've been plant-based myself for close to 9 years now.
Wow. So you never really ate meat or had any that wasn't really part of your diet from a young age?
Well, before I went vegetarian, I'd say I just had a really normal diet with everything, fish, meat, everything. But since then, yeah, vegetarian, and then fully plant-based for the past sort of 9 years.
Amazing. So I have a lot of plant-based clients, a lot of vegan, vegetarian, and one thing that I come across the most, and you might find the same, is the lack of protein. And actually something that I've noticed with vegans and veggies to a degree is their fats are a lot higher. Your fats tend to be high because a lot of stuff's coming from nuts and peanut butter and stuff like that. So the carb fat ratio is always a little bit different when I'm like looking after vegan clients, which is fine. But how do you manage that? Because actually something that I was reading on your blog is about protein powders and whether or not they are a little bit about whether or not they're beneficial, and you know, and I was reading that you get a lot of your protein just through whole foods. Like, do you take any supplements at all for protein?
I do protein
you do
powder.
you do take protein powder.
Yeah. So with protein, a really important thing in general when it comes to plant-based nutrition is I kind of have the philosophy of replacing rather than removing foods, and making sure that when we're doing that replacement, that it's with something that is nutritionally similar, if not equivalent. So for example, like let's say your usual dinner would be like spaghetti bolognese with like beef mince in there, that we don't just remove the beef mince and eat the spaghetti with the tomato-based sauce, but that we actually replace that beef mince, you know, with say textured vegetable protein, like a soy-based protein, or tofu, or like lentils, or some other kind of plant protein. So we're still getting not only the protein, but also same amount of energy overall, and also those important micronutrients, especially for our plant-based athletes, which have higher, say, iron and zinc requirements, where that's really, really important. And, you know, same goes for, say, dairy. If we're removing the yogurt or the milk, we need to find something that's going to be nutritionally equivalent, not replacing cow milk with maybe almond milk where the protein is really low, or with coconut yogurt where we're not getting that protein or that calcium. So we're finding, say, a soy yogurt instead, and just making sure we're making those smart swaps when we are moving to a plant-based diet, especially for athletes whose protein requirements are pretty much double what a non-athletic person's are.
Yeah, and it's super important with vegans and vegetarians. Like, you need to consume a little bit more protein too, because of those leucine levels too, right? That you don't naturally get in like meat or dairy products. That you know, we would naturally hit those levels, where being vegan, you just require that a little bit more. So
exactly, yeah. A protein powder can also be like a really helpful addition to just supplement the diet, to bump those protein levels up a little bit more, even if you're, say, making like some porridge or like a fruit smoothie, so we can use that protein powder in there. But that's not exclusive to plant-based people. I know, you know, plenty of people using protein powders who definitely aren't plant-based. So it's kind of just like, if it's a lower protein meal, that can be a good option to bump that up a bit more.
I've always found that to get to really get the protein levels where they need to be, it is almost a necessity. You do need some form, in some cases, of like having that protein powder to be able to bump. Like, it's that final bump.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, especially in breakfast. I find breakfast is that one meal that if you don't have the protein powder in there, unless you're being like super strategic with the breakfast choices, it can be super challenging to get that kind of 25 grams plus of protein in there.
Yeah. And also, I was listening to a podcast yesterday that they were talking about like how important it is to like get your protein in early too, because if you have a breakfast with hardly any protein in, trying to get over 100 grams throughout the rest of the day, like that's challenging. Like, if you can start your day with like 30-40 grams, hit the ground running, and then, you know, make up the rest throughout the day, it's, you know, it can be really, really beneficial.
For sure. And for, you know, optimizing recovery from training and muscle building as well, we want to be spreading that protein intake across at least 3 meals throughout the day. So having that breakfast, lunch, dinner, and 1 or 2 snacks with that 20 plus grams of protein is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the blogs that I read on your website actually was about, how do I know if I'm eating enough? And again, it's something that I come across a lot from people that are that have no education around it. You know, they're really into their sport. So especially like pole dancers and aerialists, they'll work out a lot. Like, some people they'll be like all in, a bit like CrossFit. Like, you have your sport, you go all in, you're doing CrossFit like 3-4 times a week, doing pole aerial 3-4 times a week, adding in a little bit of gym work. Some of the guys that I come across are around that. And then when I speak to people, it's always the first thing I identify, always, like, you know, just by having a rough idea of what someone's eating, like, you can immediately identify that they're not eating enough. But how, if someone's listening to this not knowing whether they're eating enough or they think they're eating enough, how do you identify if you're not eating enough?
Yeah, so common misconception around whether or not I'm eating enough is people just go by weight, and they think, oh, if I'm not losing weight, then I must be eating enough, because otherwise I'd be losing weight. But it's just really not an accurate indicator of whether or not we're eating enough, because the thing is, our bodies are you know, we're not robots, and our metabolisms are very adaptive. So if there's less energy coming in to support everything that we're doing in a day, plus all of our daily functions, our body actually goes into doing some metabolic adaptation. So essentially making some adjustments to the different systems in your body to try and conserve energy when your energy output is high, but there's not enough coming in. And that can look like, for example, lowered energy levels and feeling fatigued all the time and poor recovery from training. It can look like slow digestion. So you might get more digestive symptoms like gas and bloating and constipation. You might feel cold all the time. You might struggle to concentrate and just feel mentally very fatigued all the time. We can see irregular or complete loss of periods. That's a really common one. And even little things like poor immune function, getting sick all the time, frequent like niggles and injuries, like hair and skin and nails just not really thriving. So all these little ways that our bodies kind of just isn't thriving anymore and is making those little adjustments to try and save as much energy as possible.
It's those little things that you can tell yourself too, like really simply about your hair and nails. Like, you can tell when your nails are in good condition versus when they're not. You know, like it sounds really silly, but you can tell, can't you? And like you say, that lack of energy. Like I couldn't operate everything that I do on a day-to-day basis without fueling my body correctly. Like I would never put myself in a situation where I'd go to the studio and be under fueled. Like it's not even up for negotiation. But when I had an eating disorder, I would have been like, well, I'm going to burn more and I'm not eating, you know, like it's a terrible mindset. But food is absolutely fuel. And then what happens when you undereat, like you say, that low energy, like that alone, like I always say to people, why would you want to go train with no energy? Like that should never be even like it shouldn't be one of those things where you're like turning up to the gym and be like, oh, you know, I feel really shit today, I'm just going to drag myself through this session. You know, but one thing we and
I think swapping to like a performance focused mindset really helps change that, because you don't want to go into sessions just feeling like rubbish and not being able to do the things that you know your body actually can do just because the energy isn't there. So changing that focus to that, I want to perform my best and feel my best. And performance, I don't even just mean in training sessions, I also mean like performing in life, like you know, your ability to be present in your job and with friends, and like, you know, go for walks with the dog and just like have energy to do all the things that you want to do.
Be a good partner too, like, you know, in terms like, you know, it's the last thing that I'd want to do is get home. I used to feel it, actually this is it's really interesting you say this, actually. It's just literally just triggers something in my mind. I remember when I used to come home from a training on a Saturday before my lifestyle was quite as busy as it is now, and this is when I wasn't eating properly, and I would have these horrendous like crashes to the point where I was like, do I have like MS or something, that's like, you know, when like you have like chronic, you know, like the what's the word,
like chronic fatigue.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was to the point where like even walking around shops was incredibly difficult because the fatigue level was so high. So on a Saturday, so when I finished training at like 1:30, I have the whole rest of the day with my husband, I didn't want to do anything because I was so tired. And it was like now, like if I finish training, I could train like all day and come home and be like, right, let's go to the shop. You know, like like you say, have that energy. Like you shouldn't be getting to the end of the day unless you've had, like, obviously there are certain circumstances, but where you're like exhausted because your body's running on zero. Absolutely.
Exactly.
But also, like you say, your micronutrients play a factor in that too, right? Like when you're dehydrated, there's nothing worse than feeling dehydrated.
Hydration, even like iron intake is a really important one as well. So staying on top of iron intake, which is a little bit more challenging when you're plant-based too, because of that reduced absorption in plant-based iron sources. Our iron requirements are actually double, so from 18 milligrams all the way to 32 milligrams for plant-based females, which is really challenging to meet. So not only do we have to pay attention to getting enough iron-rich and iron-fortified foods like your cereals and your meat alternatives, which have that extra iron added, but potentially also supplementing. And, you know, that's what supplements are there for. I think supplements get a lot of, you know, it's either supplements are everything or it's supplements are demonized, but I think we need to be somewhere in the middle where we try and get most of our nutrients through food, but then supplements absolutely have their place just to help top up and supplement the diet where we just can't quite realistically meet it through food alone.
Yeah, I think supplements get a bit of a bad word because they get mixed up with stuff like because they could fall under the same umbrella as like BCAAs and creatine, and that's not saying they're bad, by the way, but there's so many. When you actually deep dive, like BCAA, creatine, fantastic supplements, but when you actually get deep dive on these websites that actually sell supplements, and then you start to get into like really high level in-depth supplements, like actual your basic vitamin C, vitamin D, B12, iron, like it all gets mixed up in these like other supplements, and that's when I think like supplementation can get a bit of a bad name, because it's like it's so much. But your actual baseline micronutrients that you need, like you say, your iron levels, your vitamin C, your vitamin D, you know, your B12, they are so important. So important.
Absolutely.
So what do you take any supplements like that are your absolute with the exception of iron that you just said, like is there any supplements that you take that you take every day, those micronutrients like vitamin C, vitamin?
Yeah, so being plant-based, B12 is definitely a non-negotiable. So anyone who's plant-based definitely should be staying on top of B12 supplementation to, you know, that's a really important one that we just can't get through food when we're plant-based. Fortified foods, you know, they have some B12, some do, but generally our intake of those is pretty inconsistent sort of on a day-to-day basis. So relying just on that is a little bit risky. So that's one. And also being plant-based, I do supplement like an algae omega-3. That would be like the plant-based equivalent of fish oil. And that's really important, again, for recovery, reducing those inflammation levels from training, and also for long-term brain health. There's a bit of research that's quite beneficial. And then creatine, myself being a strength and power based athlete, that's a one that's got a good amount of evidence. Other than that, like supplementation is a very individual thing. So if you'd come back and see, oh, my vitamin D levels are low in my blood tests, and that's one we'd be supplementing. People living in the UK during winter, probably a non-negotiable there.
Absolutely.
And other than that, like really turning to food, and say for example calcium is a really important one being plant-based. But if you're making smart food choices and including things like your fortified plant-based dairy alternatives like your soy milks and your soy yogurts and your almond milks and your tofu where that calcium has been fortified, then you can absolutely meet that just through diet alone. But we do have to make sure we're including those foods on a daily basis.
So interestingly about creatine, actually, because again, just to hear your thoughts on it, it's like you say, it's amazing if you're for increasing strength and just performance, a great performance supplement. How often do you take creatine? Is it something that's a day-to-day thing for you? Have you been taking it for very long? Do you phase it in and out? Being plant-based, how do you manage your creatine? Or is it so
I the evidence just shows that a creatine is one that you take like a daily on a long-term basis. So 3 to 5 grams per day, every day, even on rest days, any time in the day. Doesn't have to be pre or post workout, just as long as we're consistent with that. And you know, we don't have to do these loading phases and cycling of it. It really is just a daily thing. And there's actually some really interesting upcoming research around creatine potentially having some cognitive and brain health benefits as well in the long run, and even things like preserving muscle mass as we're aging. So I definitely think it's for especially plant-based people where creatine intake is not going to be there, because creatine in our meat products as well as our body producing a little bit themselves. It's a really good supplement and very safe because it's so well studied. We know it doesn't have any risks to it.
And 3 to 5 grams, that's like your daily intake, isn't it? Really, that's like how much, like you say, the body produces it naturally. And you get it for your intake, like you say. But if you're not eating meat, then it's borderline impossible.
Exactly.
A really, really good one. So another thing that happens when we undereat is the lack of sleep, and this is something I was speaking about to a client about yesterday, actually, and it was really evident. She's vegan, she's getting 4 or 5 hours a night, and doing a hell of a lot of exercise, by the way. Like she's like a real, like, got ADHD, so here, there, everywhere, like never, like always has loads of energy, exercising loads. But then when it comes to the evening, if you're doing that much exercise, like your body needs to be
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. But she's having like 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night and not really sleeping that much. And then when we deep dived on her nutrition, actually turns out that she's really under eating, not eating enough to match the energy levels. But that is something that is a real side effect, is the lack of sleep, right? Or just poor sleep.
Exactly. Yeah. So when our bodies are underfueled, and this comes back to basically a survival mechanism, our body wants to keep us awake to search for food. You know, if we were back in the caveman days and it was a famine, it wouldn't be safe to just go and lie down and sleep. Your body would want you to stay awake and look around for food. And that's essentially what is happening when we're underfueling and we're not able to get into that restorative sleep mode, is our brain is just on food. It wants you to go and eat something, so it keeps you from sleeping, essentially. That's one reason. And the other reason is a lot of our micronutrients and even certain amino acids are really important to help us produce those neurotransmitters and those chemicals that support sleep onset, such as melatonin, for example. And if we don't have the nutrients coming in actually help, then it's also really difficult to get sleep even happening, because our bodies and brains just can't produce those chemicals to help our bodies get into that restorative state.
That is actually something that people notice the most, or one of the most common side effects, in terms of like when you start focusing on your nutrition, getting your diet in order, eating back to where you really should be, how much your sleep improves. But sleep is everything. I couldn't be without sleep. Like, all of your recovery happens when you're asleep, as you know. It's so bad to neglect your sleep. It's like one of the best things you can do is get a good night's sleep.
Yeah, it has such a huge impact on how we feel as well, like our energy levels, our mood, and our motivation. And even myself, having struggled with sleep for so many years when it was in my eating disorder as well. Like, there is nothing more frustrating than lying awake for hours a night and not being able to sleep. Like, it makes you want to tear your hair out.
Yeah, it does. And then, like you say, if you're someone that's really has that passion and found your groove in your sport, for example, and you know that you're going to a class tomorrow, and then you wake up and you feel like shit, it's the repercussions there as well. For me, I'm like, well, now it's again, you're gonna have a bad session. It's just it goes back to that performance mindset, isn't it? You're not performing your best because we haven't taken the steps to get you where you need to be in order to perform at your peak. Absolutely. So how do we fix it? How do we then start making sure that we are eating enough and eating eating enough for you?
Absolutely. So it's always so very individual, and
of course it is.
Would be but the first thing I would start with is identifying the reasons why somebody isn't eating enough. Like, are there mental barriers, rules around food, restrictions around food stopping you from eating a decent amount? Or is it more of like a lack of planning and preparation? Is it just you haven't prepared your food and there's nothing to eat? Or is it like, for plant-based people, sometimes they're eating a decent volume of food, but they're not choosing the right energy dense food, so they're feeling full but they're actually not getting the calories in. So having a bit of a reflection around what those barriers are, so we can start making some shifts around targeting those and working on those, which for some people might mean a bit of meal prep or going for more easy, convenient options. For other people, it might be reaching out to an eating disorder specialist, nutritionist, or dietitian who can help them work on those food rules and restrictions and start overcoming those. And for some people, it's as simple as really just having a look at what you're eating and making a few changes to that, like starting with 3 good meals: a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, and 2 to 3 snacks per per day, making sure we're fueling our training sessions properly, having a good snack or meal after and before, and potentially even during if they're longer sessions as well. And even just looking at those individual meals and making sure that they are well balanced meals. So are we including our serve of protein, a good amount of carbohydrates, as well as some fats, and our veggies, and not just, you know, like a salad or a piece of fruit for a snack. For, you know, active people, athletes, that it's just not going to cut it. And we do have to be a bit more intentional about getting enough of that more energy dense foods into our diet.
Without a doubt. Like, a couple of things you said there that I wanted to pick up on. Firstly, planning and preparation is everything. Like you say, identifying those barriers is really important too. Like, and sometimes it's just like the education around it. Like you say, working with a coach, if it's a severe eating disorder barrier, then absolutely work with somebody that's, you know, has that can really help you. I had a client once come to me on a consultation call, and she just wanted the training plan from me. No nutrition, because she didn't want to track, and it was coming from an from a place of ED, which is like understandable. But as a coach, I said to her, like, I can't work with you. I can't provide that. I can't provide you just with a training plan, knowing that, you know, like for me it felt unsafe as a coach, and it didn't feel like the right thing to do, because she, like, you need that extra level of a specialist attention, really. Like, if that's what you're trying to overcome as well, you know, like not you know, like being mindful also of the coach that you're going to work with, if that is the case. Definitely. Right? And also as a coach as well, if anyone is a coach, like listening, like having the confidence to turn around and say, you know what, I'm not the right person for you here. Like, this is, for sure. You know, go and speak to somebody about this. But anyway, planning and preparation, huge.
Definitely massive, especially if you're a person who has a busy lifestyle. You know, you're running from training to work or study, you've got a lot of things on. Like, who's got hours and hours in their day to go and cook every single meal from scratch? Most people don't. So you like, planning ahead is such a game changer. And even saving energy, like if you come home from a long day of work and training and you haven't planned what's for dinner, and you stand there in front of the fridge not knowing what to make it, you know, it's not a good feeling, and you're probably not going to end up making the best choices. So really, even just taking that time, say on a Sunday, to sit down, plan out what you're going to make for your meals that week, make sure you have all the things that you need at home. If needed, do a bit of meal prep. If you don't want to do meal prep, make sure you've got convenience options, like, you know, your salad mixes and your pre-cooked microwave rice and things like that, which are really handy in those situations where you're time poor as well. And even like making sure, if you've got a busy day, that you pack all your food for the day the night before, and you make up your lunchbox, and you bring your snacks to work, and you do all of those things.
That's just dedication though, right? Like, that is not dedication, sorry, that's just discipline as well, right? If you want it enough,
a little bit,
you will be disciplined to do that.
Recognizing how much it pays off, because of how much better you feel and perform and function as a result of it, and how much time and potentially money it actually saves. You know, if you don't have to go and buy food all the time when you're out, or you can save time during the week because you've done that little bit of prep, or even just getting through your sessions feeling good because you've had that snack before. Like, it definitely makes it worth it.
I don't think there's anything better than knowing that you're finishing a session, going home to the dinner that you've got planned. So I'm exactly the same as you. On Sundays, I would sit and plan, write out the meal, each meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, all of it, then go and do a weekly shop. For me personally, it changed the game when I did a weekly shop over and above a monthly shop. Go and buy what you need for the week, have it in the house. And then also it eliminates that feeling of like, oh, so we just pick up this because there's nothing in the house, because you know you're going home to, like, and again, the foods don't have to be restricted. Like you say, like, if something like a spag bowl, like, that's really nice, a really yummy dish. It's not restricted. You know, knowing that you're finishing your session and then you're going to go home and have that for dinner. You know, I mean, I'm really sad. I get excited for what I'm going to have for dinner. But like you say, I also hate stopping at the shop and then being like, oh God, what am I going to have? And then like, it's not just the one thing that you buy, is it, that you want to pick up? Like, it turns into a multiple item shop that then like that just snowballs really, really quickly. But yeah, the planning is absolutely everything. So with your pre and post workout for you, like what are your favorite go-to snacks for pre and post? Like what do you and during as well, actually? I mean, I'm a big fan of the banana. Banana is
great. Yeah, so
good.
Pre-training, we want to be going for some easy to digest foods which are carbohydrate focused. So here's where we want to go for your more of the like refined carbohydrates, because that's what's going to give you that quick source of energy for training and not sit too heavy in your stomach so that you end up feeling really sick and heavy during sessions. So that could be something like toast or crumpets or fruit toast or rice cakes with some like peanut butter or banana or jam or honey spreads of choice. You could do some cereal or like, you know, some kind of cereal bar, like a Cliff bar and a banana, or I know in the UK people love those serene, those malt loaves with a banana, you know, something like that. That's always great pre-training. Even like a fruit smoothie or some like Weetabix, something like that. So really carbohydrate
gets
quick,
in the blood,
easy,
gets in. Yeah.
And look, if you have never eaten before training and even the thought of that makes you feel sick, like even starting with something small, like some fruit juice or 2 rice cakes with a bit of honey, you know, something really small, and then building your way up, that's a good place to start too. After training is, again, we want the carbs. We also want to focus a bit more on protein. So getting, you know, 25 plus grams of protein in there. And that could be something like some protein overnight oats, or like some porridge. You could do like a smoothie. You could do a savory option with like some toast and scrambled tofu or scrambled eggs or whatever your choice is there. Or if it's not in the morning, of course, like your regular meal with, you know, some kind of carbohydrate protein source, whether that's like a wrap or a sandwich or a rice bowl or a stir fry or a pasta dish. So that's going to provide that recovery fuel. And then we also want to get some good micronutrients in there, whether that's from fruit or whether it's from veggies, whole grains, and get the body into that recovery mode. During sessions, easy to digest carbohydrates, whether that's like sports drink or fruit juice, banana, like a cereal bar. I really love the little fruit puree pouches, like those little baby food fruit pouches. They're absolutely awesome during training.
Love that.
And lollies are a good one as well, because my blood sugar sometimes drops a little bit during training. Lollies are my absolute go-to. Some people also like the dextrose powders, like those carb powders, again, just because it's not going to sit heavy in your stomach. It's really just quick digesting carbohydrates. And that's the things that we're looking for. When those sessions are over an hour long, we do need some carbohydrates during, just to keep our energy levels and performance up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say this a lot to clients too, because a lot of people bring in protein bars for like during sessions or in between, and like you're better off saving it till save the protein to after, switch that out for a banana. I've seen a lot, I don't know if you've seen a lot doing the rounds on social media about I'm gonna say the power, because a lot of people have been raving about it, but like honey and salt. Have you seen that trend recently at all? Honey and salt pre-workout, because of the way that it like spikes your, you know, just spikes the
look, it's a fair choice. However, I do have to say, like, if you've got a big session, we're looking at your requirements being close to a gram of carbohydrates per kilo of body weight. So for like, say, a 65 kilo female, that's about 65 grams of carbs. That's a lot of honey to try and get in before a session.
That is a lot of honey. Yeah. I just didn't know if it made its way over to Australia, if you'd seen these rounds. I'd seen a lot of people do it like almost like a shot of tequila, putting honey on their hand and then licking the salt. And people have been saying they've been getting crazy benefits from it. Like crazy pumps. You know, it's gonna spike the electrolytes, you know. But it's just fads that go around. You know how it is. People try these things. I'm a big fan of rice cakes. I'm a big fan of that.
Bit of peanut butter, a bit of banana. That's one of my favorites too.
You can load them. That's, I think, the key with, like, so when I speak to a lot of people, like, so when I was speaking to somebody yesterday, their gap was about 400 calories a day. And that sounds like a lot, but it's not when you break it down. Like if you had a protein shake and then added in a banana and then added in some peanut butter and maybe a little bit of oats, before you know it, you've got like a 500 calorie shake. It's the same with,
it's just knowing what foods to make. knowing what foods to pick makes it more achievable.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you tweak your calories and what you eat like on your rest days versus your training days, or do you keep it quite consistent?
Because I train most days of the week, so I generally have 1 to 2 rest days a week. And for anyone who is as regularly active as that, like 4+ times a week, your rest days are more recovery days than rest days. It's the days where your body is repairing and rebuilding and refueling from the exercise that you've done. Potentially you're catching up on some of the energy that you didn't get, that you needed on those big training days where appetite wasn't so high and your expenditure was really high. Plus, recovery takes more than just that same day of training. Recovery takes 24 to 48 hours after training. So you're still got that high energy requirement because your body's repairing and rebuilding tissue on those days, even though you're not exercising. So general recommendation is keep food the same. You might just swap around some food choices. You might not need that honey and salt shot and instead can have something a little bit more micro. Yeah.
No, I do exactly the same. I don't ever tweak I'm the same as you. I work out sort of five days a week. 6 days a week. I don't ever change my calorie intake. And I think that's what people forget when you work out, or if you're using weights in particular, the body keeps breaking down and keeps repairing for 28 to 48 hours, sometimes even longer in some cases. Like if you have those severe DOMs that last sort of 72 hours, but your body, the more muscle you have, the more calories you burn on a day-to-day basis anyway.
Exactly.
So,
and if we restrict food or cut down our food intake on that rest day, then not only is it going to impair the adaptations you can make to your training, it's going to impair your recovery. And then going into that next session on the next day, you're probably just not going to feel that great because you haven't been able to fully recover with that reduced intake.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm glad that you're sort of mirroring that, because I see some people will tweak their calories to reduce them on their rest days, and it's a common question that I get asked a lot as well as a coach. Like, if I'm not working out today, shall I just lower my calorie intake? I'm like, no, it's like the worst thing you can do. So do you work with people predominantly one-to-one on their nutrition, or do you work with, do you do like training plans too? Like, how do you work with people in particular?
I do nutrition one-on-one. So that's either like on a kind of whenever they need basis or on a weekly basis. Most of my clients see me either every week, every second week, or every third week. And I find that works really well to just have that ongoing support and accountability as well. And then for CrossFit, I coach classes. So I do, around 6-7 classes a week, which is super fun because they're like small groups.
Oh yeah, it's intimate, isn't it? It's nice. So do you work with anybody, or do you just work with CrossFit athletes? Do you work with athletes? Do you work with any line of sport?
No, I work with anyone. I do have quite a lot of CrossFit and strength and conditioning training clients, from anywhere from a recreational to an semi-elite level. I've also got quite a few endurance athletes such as triathletes and runners, and some martial arts clients, and then also quite a range of clients who probably wouldn't consider themselves athletes, do a bit of exercise, some minimal exercise, just anyone really, depending on whether we feel like we'd be a good match in working together, even if it's a completely different area to sports nutrition and more focused on just building good nutrition habits and a good relationship with food.
Yeah, so important. So the question I was just going to ask you, just what I was going to ask, do you work with people that have previously had eating disorders or do have eating disorders? Do you work with people like from your experience, from your background?
Yes.
Is that something that you specialize in too?
Yeah, it's probably one of my main areas of work as well. Just given my background, I feel like it does give me a really high level of empathy and being able to relate and understand what those clients are going through and how it feels to go through those things, and also the kind of fears and thoughts they have around it, and the discomfort of going through recovery and changing things around their food and facing those food fears and rules. So yeah, I do have quite a lot of clients somewhere along that disordered eating spectrum.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good to know. Again, it's so common. It's not spoken about enough. And it's great. There's a lot of people in within the industry that I'm in that really do have eating disorders, and I really think it's important to work with a specialist. I know it's really difficult to say, but how long do well, actually, I've got a couple of questions. Like for me, I feel like even though I manage everything okay now, and I don't really have body dysmorphia as badly as I did, because again, I changed my mindset. It's absolutely like a lot of it is mindset based too. When you start seeing it as a performance and start seeing how you're performing too, like when you feel your body more, and then how you're feeling and being in tune with all those things. Like again, like I said about on those Saturdays when I'd crash, like I don't get that anymore because my body's fueled. Like when you start to see all of those positive benefits, and you're like, okay, right, so this is it all sort of clicks, doesn't it? And you're like, okay, right, so when I actually do fuel my body, like I'm achieving these PBs, or I'm hitting these goals that I had, but it never really, it still doesn't ever really go away. It's still always present in the back of your mind somewhere. Like, do you feel like, and this is actually a really personal question, but do you feel like that's the case, even though you're like, you've come out of it and you're in a really healthy place? Do you feel like anybody that goes, anybody that has previously had an ED, or has one at the moment, although you can get yourself to a much better place and in a positive mindset, it still lingers a little bit? For me, it does. I feel like it never truly goes away, but it's how you manage it.
For sure. In cases that is the case. I feel like there's a lot of different situations around this. Like for me personally, because my eating disorder originally stemmed from like really having that perfectionist mindset around my diabetes and struggling with feeling out of control in my body with the blood sugars. Like for me, I'd say the only two things that I still find I sometimes get a little bit of hiccups with is, number one, like body image. Like that's always so many of us women. That's a really tough one. And well, that's a tough one. And then for me, the other one is blood sugars. If I'm having a bad blood sugar day, or if I spike high after a meal, that's when I might get some of those thoughts that are kind of first a little bit disordered, and then I just rein myself in and have to say like, no, that's not going to help you, and really be conscious and mindful not to act on those thoughts and to be a little bit kinder to myself.
And it's how you manage that, right? And that's what I think you learn over time. Like you say, being able to identify it, that you're falling into that headspace or that mindset, and then being like, nope, come on, like we're having, let's not look at ourselves in the mirror today, because you're going to be unkind, and you don't need that. You don't need that.
Sure.
It is definitely mindset. Well, that's really, really good to know. I'm going to link your Instagram and obviously your bios and stuff your blog, in the notes, because they're a really, really good read. And I think, seeing someone that's a specialist in nutrition can be, if you're struggling in those particular areas, can be hugely, hugely beneficial. So for anyone that is plant-based, what would be your biggest advice to anybody who's listening? Plant-based, they are like, because even if you're working out I think for a lot, I don't know necessarily in the CrossFit world, a lot of polars, for us, a lot of people work out 3-4 times a week, and when you're working out that much, you're in athletic territory. Like you are, you're definitely, you need to think of yourself as an athlete. So the people that are training a lot, plant-based, again, wanting to get stronger, wanting to improve performance goals, like what would be your advice?
I would say,
where to start?
Yeah, no, like my top advice that can kind of be applicable to anyone would be, you know, maybe like once a month or so, have this little checklist in terms of your nutrition that you can go through and kind of reflect on and ask yourself these questions of whether or not you're fueling yourself well and sufficiently. And those questions would include things like, how are my energy levels on a day-to-day basis? How's my energy during training? How's my recovery? For those where it's relevant, am I getting my period regularly? Am I sleeping well? Is my mood good? And am I making the progress that I'm expecting in my training sessions? Am I getting stronger and fitter and faster and all of the above as I would expect? And even looking at, am I eating regularly? Am I feeling good about my food choices? Having a bit of a reflection around all of these things, which can give you that bit of feedback around the areas that might need a little bit of work in terms of your nutrition. I think that can be a really good place to start.
No, I think that's excellent advice. And I think it's so important to be in tune with your body and also be aware of like how you feel after certain foods too. You know, like that feeling or what's giving you those, like if you're getting, you know, maybe like I for one now, like I very rarely have any fizzy drinks or sweets or chocolate, or I might do it the weekend a little bit, but I won't during the week, because it's those crashes that I get personally. Like I just can't do it to my body where like you'll eat something that's really high sugar, and then my body will just crash, and then like I feel like I'm really tired. I need to like pick my body back up with something else. Like that's like just being aware of how foods make you feel as well, and whether they agree with you. And, you know, like you say, are you eating the right stuff? Are you feeling good? Are you feeling ready for your workouts? All that good stuff.
Yeah, I have this conversation with so many clients around noticing that difference when they say don't have a substantial lunch, or they miss their morning snack, and how that then translates to how they feel later in the day. Even things like if their meal wasn't very balanced, that they end up already turning to snacks an hour later because their meal was missing, you know, that protein. Or the healthy fat component. And pay attention to those things.
Absolutely. And one thing you said earlier, actually, which I'll finish on, is that you're saying about your snack. So I structure my clients' days pretty much exactly the same as what you said: breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then morning snack in the evening. And you can manipulate your calories throughout the day a little bit as well. So if you wanted a bigger snack before, like you say, or you maybe wanted something more in the evening in the dessert territory, you know, you can manipulate your calories. But it was really interesting. I had a client this week, and her snacks, she's vegetarian, but her snacks were cucumber and celery. And I was like, this is like, you know, like, again, you think when you think of a snack, you tend to go fruit and, you know, veg, which is absolutely, which is great for those, like you say, those micronutrients. But sometimes you really have to reflect on like, what nutritional value is this giving me? Because like you can have like that, but you need like maybe a protein shake alongside, or, you know, like you say, some rice cakes alongside, or something.
Even like exactly. Some crackers or muesli bar or something to go with it.
Yeah, not just having that. We're like, well, I had some fruit, and the same with like, oh, I had a salad. And I've someone I spoke to the other day. She's a vegan, and she. Oh, I think I turned that off then. She snacks a lot, and I'm like, yeah, because you're not getting in protein. Like once you get that in, like you'll see the changes in your eating habits too, because you'll be like feeling fuller. You know, you're not going to get those cravings as much maybe as like what you once did, once you prioritize all of the good stuff.
Yeah, making those meals nice and substantial.
Yes, that's the key. Well, Nina, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. This has been hugely beneficial, and I think really valuable to anyone who's just nutrition in general, but plant-based in particular. I think this will give a lot of insight. So thank you so much for your time and your knowledge.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.